Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be talking about the Beastmen in our State of the Faction series. Well, the Beastmen are in a pretty good spot right now, having received a wonderful rework in the Silence and the Fury and then getting a lot of attention in Warhammer 3 pretty much just for existing. There's a bunch of DLC that's coming in for the Chaos factions and they're getting something every now and then, which is really good. Now I very much doubt that the Beastmen are going to get a DLC dedicated to them. This can be kind of certain considering that the roster is pretty much almost done. What they're mostly missing is some reskins, some unique units, but they'll likely appear in the form of DLC for other races and then just tag on to the Beastmen. But yeah, I mean, some stuff can be done, and there could be a few fixes coming in that would maybe help out the other lords, and there is still some missing content that we could potentially see as FLC, so yeah, let's talk about this. But before anything, let's talk about something in the generic sense. So, when it comes to hearthstones, they're quite small and quite limited. I still think that they should be like this. What I do think is that they should have 4 slots, as it would be cool to see some added buildings towards it, focusing around the different mono-god factions. So 1 for Khorne, 1 for Slaanesh, 1 for Nurgle, and 1 for Tzeentch. And I'd say this would be later down the line, as we're currently still missing god-touched creatures and beastmen for Khorne and Slaanesh. Not so much Khorne, but you know what I mean. And it would be cool to see that happen, because what could be done here is just as the main building does for the hearthstones, where you would be able to recruit those units from these main buildings if you had the unit capacity unlocked, obviously, and not need the building specifically in your horde. This means early on, if you can get the capacity unlocked, you'll be able to get your Pestigors, Zangors, Khorngors, Slangors, obviously in the future, through this main hub alongside your horde buildings. It's actually going to make it easier for you to be able to get some corruption going too, and maybe some bonuses attributed towards the god-touched gores to make them a little bit stronger too. The idea here is to have dedicated hearthstones, and I think something like that is obviously quite lore-friendly. We do know that Zangors, Slangors, and so on, they do exist, they can be found in the world. Now you can recruit them as generic troops, well, just the Zangors and the Pestigors right now. So you dedicate the hearthstone, it spreads the corruption, which helps the specific monogod faction, and it locks the other ones from being able to be built in that specific hearthstone. To elevate this a little bit further, what could be done is every time that you build a hearthstone dedicated to one of the gods, it could go into a mechanic very similar to the dedication for Norska, but rather than it being focused on getting faction-wide bonuses, as the Beastmen already get very good bonuses as it stands, it could just be get it all the way to the end of the bar, unlock a pseudo-legendary hero, one dedicated to Khorne, which would be a Wargore just in Khornate armor, and then a Bray Shaman for either Slaanesh, Nurgle, or Tzeentch with their respective lore of magic. Obviously with a little bit of an update visually to make them a little bit different, but this is just in case, you know, if Games Workshop don't allow for certain characters to be introduced as legendary heroes, it'd be nice to see some pseudo-legendary heroes. We've kind of seen that obviously with Tamokar being able to get a Nurgle-style Bray Shaman, even though it's got the Lore of the Beasts. But it would be nice for the Beastmen to have access to the other lores of magic or a Wargore of Khorne, just for a little bit of fun, right? So there's 4 legendary lords for the Beastmen currently, and really only one of them is truly unique. The other ones were added in Warhammer 1. They've had quality of life changes, but I would say it would be nice to see the other 3 get something kind of unique to them, just to elevate them a little bit further. Now, Taurox needs nothing. He is perfectly fine, barring the Cornators, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to mention it here because I know there's going to be someone in the comments saying it, but yeah, Cornators moving to the Beastmen. If memory serves, someone at Creative Assembly actually did say that at one point during a blog or something, so I think it's only a matter of time, but yeah, just covering my ass here because I know someone's going to say it. Let's go into the Legendary Lords. We're going to talk about Morgur first, mostly because he is my favourite of the Beastmen. He is my comfort campaign. I'll actually sit down and casually play him when I want to play Total War, but I don't know what faction I want to play. So, again, very cool faction, has extra capacity for Chaos Spawn, a lot of corruption spreading. He is pretty basic, but pretty strong. What I'd see here is in a very similar sense to what I've just discussed with the normal Beastmen, but a unique building only for him, which allows him to have all of the Chaos Spawn. That means that in the Horde buildings, he should also have access to all of the Chaos Spawn too. Now this is important because Morga himself is a spawn, and he's supposed to be the spawn-focused army, so having access to all the different type of spawn would allow for some pretty interesting armies. Sure, they're not unique models, and functionally they mostly do the same thing, but you do get a little bit of difference between them in terms of how they perform in battle, so it would be kind of fun to see. I've actually been using a mod for this, and it's one of these mods that should really be vanilla, just to add in a little bit of unique flavor here. What could be done to make it a little bit better is, if you take Athaloran, which is pretty much where you want to go anyway, if you just take the Oak of Ages, you can have a unique landmark there, which has the chance of increasing the capacity of your spawn every, I don't know, 5 turns or so, right? The idea is it makes it cheaper for you to field more and more spawn armies, so that could be the entire focus in your campaign. You can mix it around with any other units, but you'll heavily be incentivized to use spawn. So as you can see, it doesn't have to be a truly 100% new mechanic, or even just taking from something else. Just something basic kind of elevates the faction as it stands. Malagor himself is super fun, mostly because Creative Assembly finally gave him the ability to fly. That's representative of him on the tabletop. I can't imagine that must have been easy, because they originally modeled him to, well, basically be on foot. He doesn't have a lot of lore, which kind of sucks, but then again, this was during the time that Games Workshop would introduce characters, not really do a lot of novels, and then they blame the fans for Warhammer Fantasy dying. But yeah, there is a little thing here that could be done into a mechanic. You see, he desires nothing more than to basically destroy the human gods and goddesses, right? It's something that's ingrained into the 7th edition army book. So what about if there was unique herdstones within certain places within the Empire, Estalia, Bretonnia, Kislev, and Talia, where you could get unique herdstones from that, a little marker next to the herdstone obviously, and it would give you a small faction-wide bonus and some maybe reductions towards prey shamans and so on. The idea here is just to make you stronger and getting you a few more spellcasters. It's something relatively basic, I know, but the idea here is it doesn't have to be like Torok, something kind of unique, which was actually just a copy-paste of the Lubu mechanic from Three Kingdoms. Not complaining, by the way, it works incredibly well. But the idea here is just something to add a little bit of flavor. And lastly, we have Khazrak. Now, Khazrak is a very well-known character in the lore of Warhammer Fantasy, and most of his lore centers around fighting Boris Todbringer, which actually was done in Warhammer 1. If you did the Call of the Beastmen campaign, it was basically playing Khazrak to try and kill off Boris. Those mini-campaigns unfortunately have not been transferred to Warhammer 3, which I imagine would just be a massive hassle in terms of code, because the code for the game has changed dramatically from game 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3. But I would like to see something being done for Khazrak to kind of implement that lore bit. A questing system very similar to Malachi, but also very different, because you wouldn't be doing like 50 million things maybe to kill off Boris. The thing is, you can kill off Boris within, what, 5-6 turns? But a big proper quest battle and a build up to lead against that would be great, where, say for example, you'd start off in the Empire as you normally do, but you do some damage in the Empire, you do some quests in Bretonnia, in the Southern Realms, maybe even Cathay if they so wish. Be the man-bane, essentially. Like Malachi, you would get some bonuses, but you'd be focused on doing damage, rather than like, oh, recruit this and get that. It's literally just kill this many Bretonians, kill this many Imperials, raise certain settlements by a certain culture, all building up to a final battle with Boris Todbringer as the final quest. I think something like that would work out quite well, because the Dawn of Man, or whatever the last quest was, Fall of Man actually, I don't know, man, it just doesn't fit with Khazrak when you know his story. Again, it's just a basic suggestion. It could just give faction-wide bonuses, make him a bit stronger, because if anyone deserves to be the strongest of the Beastmen Lords in terms of faction-wide bonuses, it should be Khazrak, at least in my opinion. Alright, we're going to talk about anything that's kind of missing, and first thing we have to talk about is the Beastmen roster. The roster is small, and that's not really Games Workshop's fault. In fact, we actually have basically new types of Centaurs and so on. Keep in mind that the Beastmen have historically always been ignored by Games Workshop. Hell, they finally got good for Age of Sigmar, and then they decided to squat them there. Yeah, it's not fun. Interestingly enough, they're decent in the old world, but it's only a matter of time until they get nerfed into the ground. But yeah, not a lot of units are missing. We are missing some stuff which are pretty much educated guesses, and some stuff which, well, it's pretty clear that we're going to get. I do wish we did have a few more range units, though. I think the Beastmen could have done with a few skirmish range units. So 2 things that we can pretty much expect are Corn Gores and Slan Gores. Corn Gores are likely going to be in the next DLC. I'll be very surprised if they're not. So yeah, God Touch Gores, Volcorn with Frenzy, additional hand weapons. Pretty much what you expect. Magic resistant too. Yeah, they're going to perform quite well. At the end of the day, having the additional hand weapon gores are pretty good. So having them being a little bit stronger by being God Touched is going to make them even better. My only hope is that when we get the Slan gores, so the Slaanesh variant, that it could take a page out of the book for Chaos and Conquest, which is the Warhammer Fantasy mobile game. Yeah, giving them like javelins would be kind of cool, because that means that we could have a skirmishing range unit, maybe make those anti-large twos and spears, just so all 4 God-touched gores do something different, because, you know, we've got these Zinch ones with the hand weapon and shield, we've got the Pestigores with great weapons. If we could add 4 different ones, it would be absolutely great. I don't know if that's entirely possible. Again, it's not really CA's fault there, it's actually more of we're at the whim of Games Workshop, but I mean, it would just be cool, and it would be really nice to have a bit of theming difference. At this point, it's also important to note, we could end up getting some other stuff too. Likely, obviously, the Cornitors we're going to get, but they're not going to be part of the DLC because they would be just like a free edition. Centaurs of Slaanesh would fit really well. I know some people are going to say, well, we already have the Zinchian ones, but, I mean, if you know the lore of the Centaurs and essentially what they do is drink and fuck, it makes sense to make them Sangors. I would like to see just a few additions here, just to give some mono-god style to the Beastmen, right? Doesn't have to be a full army's worth of stuff, just a few additions here and there. It'll be kind of good. Okay, something more unique. The Great Spine Chaos Beast is something that we should expect at some time down the line, mostly because it was actually in the Warhammer 3 art book. But what this is essentially a Chaos Warhound who has been heavily mutated. It's absolutely massive now and does a lot of damage. It's one of my favorite Forge World models. It's simple, but it's grim. Now, originally, this in the art book was posted with green art, so a lot of people thought, well, we might see this for Nurgle. Maybe that's just something that they were playing around with. It'll be good to see this come in eventually, just because it's fast and it's a big single entity monster. Those can be kind of fun for doom stacking. Not like it's a massive need, but, you know, it would be nice to have monsters with the Beastmen. I don't know what Monogod faction could introduce this. I know some people might say Slaanesh, but I do really have another feeling for Slaanesh, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Yeah, so fast monster, very strong, good for taking out other beasts, I'd say. It'd probably rampage quite a bit too. I mean, why not, right? It's a cool monster. Then there's the gigantic Chaos Spawn. So essentially, yeah, it's a Chaos Spawn that's giant. Again, super cool. God, a lot of this stuff from Forge World was just so cool, man. I really should paint mine at some point. One day. But yeah, it's supposed to do a lot of damage. Again, move around fairly decent, but it's still random movement as it was on the tabletop. So I imagine you wouldn't really have too much of that. But it would probably rampage too. It should thrash about and be a horde killer, and also be very good for taking out single entity monsters because of the big spikes that it's got. Well, they're technically just like kind of like praying mantis arms, but on its back. But again, spawns can be very unique looking, so having this could kind of show the different styling of a spawn, because right now, if you look towards the normal spawns that we do have, it's the same basic rig and animations. The Beastmen one looks a little bit different, but it's still like, yeah, basic spawns. The last thing, which is actually quite unique, is the Praeton, which is a beast normally found in Bretonnia, but can be found in different locations. These are supposed to be incredibly fast, incredibly rapid. They were made by the Bray Shamans to be the counter to like Bretonian Pegasuses. Pegasi? One of the two. They're extremely destructive, they destroy the land around them, and their screams can actually drive people mad. Again, super cool model. It'd be nice to see a big flying creature. This is the thing, right? It's going to be this and the Chimera, which are missing in terms of flyers. I like the Chimera. It's likely that we're going to see the Chimera at some points, considering that that was also in the art book. But the Praeton is just so much cooler in terms of visual and it's something that is really important to have. This is why I'm kind of worried, because Beastmen are likely not going to get another DLC. I'd love to see something, and we discussed this earlier on a few months ago, I think, a Scraps DLC, where it's a DLC which focuses on units for like every single type of faction. So like 1 or 2 units for the Beastmen, 1 or 2 units for Bretonnia, 1 or 2 units for, I don't know, anyone else, right? But like a massive amount, just like, hey, we're going to add for everyone. I don't know if the community would like something like that. I don't know if Creative Assembly have ever thought of something like that. But I feel like it could be kind of good for the factions that are essentially done, but could do with like a few little additions here and there. Now, Legendary Lord and Legendary Hero wise, we have 4 Legendary Lords for the Beastmen and no Legendary Heroes. This is something which I think is fine, but it would be nice if we had at least 1 more Legendary Lord and at least 1 Legendary Hero. It's important to think about how Legendary Heroes are introduced, and also how and what they bring to the faction and the race as a whole. It's always been well received, just had a little bit of issues during Shadows of Change, but that was because of 150 other matters, in all honesty. So I want to look towards some of the missing characters, the ones that were featured in the 7th edition army book, and see if any of them kind of fit here. So as it stands, at least in my opinion, there's 3 possible characters for a Legendary Hero. You guys might think differently and think, well, this one should be a Legendary Lord instead, and that's fine. It very much depends on different perspective. So, first one is Slugtongue. This is a character who's known to be spreading very, very destructive plagues, more soul-living anthrax than anything else. A lot of people see him as a character that could potentially have some sort of attachment to Nurgle, maybe give him the lore of Nurgle, which could kind of work in all honesty. But the problem is that we already have a very heavy focus on Nurgle characters as it stands. And in my opinion, I'd like to see a character which is quite unique and also more suited to Undivided than anything else. Then we've got Moonclaw, who's in the middle. Moonclaw is a Beastman born from Morsleep itself. So it's not really a Beastman, but rather a living manifestation of chaos, riding atop of a mount with 2 heads and another monstrosity. By the way, it's very important to tell you here that none of these characters, the ones that we're seeing in the hero section, had models. They just had rules and artwork, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, he's a manifestation of chaotic powers, so I could see him as an undivided creature, maybe having access to spells from all the different laws of magic, because he is supposed to be a spellcaster. Very, very destructive, fast, and also decent at melee combat, because he's supposed to embody that of the 4 gods. It could work. Moonclaw, I think, would be really, really interesting to see how the Creative Assembly artists would create such a character. We have very little reference art, so it would be cool to let their art team and designers just go wild on that. Lastly, there is Ungrel Fourhorn, but the problem here is he's not very interesting. He's literally just a Gave with schizophrenia. That's probably the best way of explaining the character. He loses his mind, kills a bunch of beastmen, kills the shaman, kills the lord, disappears, works with a small warband of like Gors and mutants and stuff, but even the other beastmen try to kill him off. I don't see him as a really interesting character. He's a tragic character, but I don't think he'd fit too well in Total War. So I'd say any of the 2 characters would work really, really well. I fall on Moonclaw here. Some of you might say that he should be a Legendary Lord. There's a reason why I don't want him to be a Legendary Lord, and that's because there's 2 possible characters that I could see as Legendary Lords. One is Gorus Warhoof, and the other is Gorfor the Beast Lord. Gorus Warhoof is the sire of 1,000 young, essentially the father of the Centaur race. And it would be kind of cool to see him implemented because, yeah, I mean, that way we could have all the main forms of Beastmen being represented in-game. A Minotaur, a Gore, and, well, a Bestigor, and now a Centaur. This could mean that we could have a Horde faction, which is highly mobile, focused on skirmish combat, and it would just be kind of cool. Gorus is a character I very much like. He falls under the Soneshi route, and I feel like a 5th and final Legendary Lord for the Beastmen, hell, if we get 2, I mean, even better, but a 5th and final one would be really, really good. The other character is Gorfor the Beast Lord, and the thing is that Gorfor is a chariot-based character, acts very similar to that of Khazrak. He's very cool, very important. He's also long dead in the lore, but that doesn't really matter. I just think that a little bit of variety is better than just going, hey, it's him, just better at this. Plus, this could be taken even further. If we end up getting Gorus and Creative Assembly feel like they could, plus with Games Workshop's permission, of course, we could end up getting a Lord and a Hero for Centigores. Something that people have been asking for a long, long time. Alright, I've been asking for a long, long time. But again, it shows the variety and it shows that you can have different styles of armies, which is quite important for the Beastmen who are supposed to be incredibly varied. I don't know. Maybe it's just me wanting to get a little bit of everything, but I think this makes perfect sense. Again, I don't really see that we'll get any sort of DLC for the Beastmen, unless we get something really different in the old world and Games Workshop finally budge and let CA use some old world content. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it would be kind of cool just to get a little bit coming in, obviously, as we've been doing so far, from the DLCs for the Chaos factions, and then go, hey, here's a final update to the Beastmen. Here's a final Legendary Lord, just so we can finish them up. Thanks for following the Beastmen through that saga of, well, close to 10 years now. Now we look towards something else to finish off, right? Because I think that's quite important. We don't know how long this game is going to get supported, because obviously eventually they're going to have to move to new titles, but it would be nice to see them progressively finish off a race and go, yep, this one's done, we're happy with it. Let's move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start with a discussion. I've got a bunch of things coming up soon, as you might have seen in the community tab. I'm working on a pretty cool video. Almost done all the timesheets for it, like just to plan out what hour and when to do stuff. It's going to be a hell of a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon.